Hello, my name is Pastor Kathy Kollar. I'm the pastor of Pleasant Valley Lutheran Church near Malabar Farm and St. Paul Lutheran Church in Lucas, Ohio. Greetings. We're reading through the Bible with commentary. We are in the book of 1 Samuel, and we are reading about David. So the Israelites have come, have settled, have gone through some bunch of judges, had their first king come, King Saul, and King Saul has been a disappointment. So now we have David, who has been introduced, who is not king yet. We still have Saul as king at the moment. And Saul, of course, has a son named Jonathan, who we will hear about. In our previous session, David had come and seen, oh, you guys are fighting the Philistines, only nobody's fighting, and this Philistine is coming out. And Goliath, well, we can kill him. So he kills Goliath, he's presented to Saul, and now we are continuing on from there in chapter 18. When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he was wearing and gave it to David and his armor, and even his sword and his bow and his belt. David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. As a result, Saul set him over the army, and all the people, even the servants of Saul, approved. Verse 6. As they were coming home, when David returned from killing the Philistine, the women came out of the towns of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines and songs of joy and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they made merry, Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. So has David literally killed 10,000 people? But no, when we sing, we get poetic, and they're saying, oh, this wonderful David. And Saul was very angry, for this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day on. Verse 10. The next day an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house, while David was playing the lyre, as he did day by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul threw the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. And David marched out and came in leading the army. David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw, this is just difficult to read out loud sometimes, when Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for it was he who marched out and came in leading them. So they may have ascribed to David the 10,000s and to Saul 1,000, but which one is the man of action? We've already talked about that Saul was kind of this almost bipolar, where he's all angry and then he's also quite passive. Even when they were anointed, he'd been anointed and they're announcing that who's going to be the king, he's hiding with the luggage. So, and he's very susceptible to whatever the people think. So he's kind of this weird passive, maybe passive aggressive, ascribe things to Saul. He's been 3,000 years ago. But David, to his credit, is definitely a man of action, who, when he sees Goliath, he's like, well, yeah, we can take down Goliath, and probably is having a blast being the head of 1,000 because he's out marching and doing and fighting and active. So, and people like that, don't they? So verse 16, but all Israel and Judah loved David. So at this point, they're actually a united kingdom, but they're still referred to as Israel and Judah. For it was he who marched out and came in leading them. Verse 17, then Saul said to David, here is my elder daughter Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines deal with him. So, let somebody else kill him. I won't kill this guy, but I'll bet the Philistines will. David said to Saul, who am I and who are my kinsfolk, my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But at the time when Saul's daughter Merab should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel the Maholathite as a wife. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved, and it's Michal, Michal loved David. Saul was told the thing pleased him. Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she might be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines might be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, you shall now be my son-in-law. Saul commanded his servants, speak to David in private, and say, see, the king is delighted with you, and all his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law. So Saul's servants reported these words to David in private, and David said, does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and of no repute? The servants of Saul told him, this is what David said. And Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king desires no marriage present except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged on the king's enemies. Now Saul planned to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So Middle East is still this way. It's a very clannish society when you have interdependence and interrelational. So even now in the Middle East, when you've got these sects and groups of people who are terrorist groups, they're very hard for spies to break into because they're all related to each other. You are married to my daughter, therefore you can't attack me and you can't hit me or hurt me because I'm your father-in-law or your cousin-in-law or your uncle-in-law or some other in-law, and the marriages are political. And that still happened even in the West. There's certainly the monarchies would have relations and marriages that were done for political gain, but not to the extent that it was the case during the biblical times in the Middle East. When you hear about David or Solomon having all these wives, part of the reason that they had so many wives is that somebody would come from some other country somewhere and bring with him a wife for David. So now you can't attack me because you're my son-in-law, my father-in-law, my whatever-in-law. So part of the deal is if you are married to me, if you're related to me by marriage, that will protect me and you can't attack me. And then secondly, Saul is already seeing the writing on the wall. Here is David, who is doing super well. The Lord is with him. Everybody loves him. Samuel's already told Saul, hey, you're doomed. You're not gonna have a dynasty. You're not going to continue on. So he can see who's coming up as David. But David doesn't have a bunch of money. He's like, I can't pay a bride price. He's like, fine, 100 foreskins. That's the tip that they cut off during circumcision, just a little flap of skin at the tip of a male person's genitalia that they cut off. It's like, go get me 100 foreskins. And so Saul is thinking, well, the Philistines will kill him and then I don't have to kill him. So even though he's offering to have David be his son-in-law, that doesn't mean that he doesn't still want to hurt David. So verse 25, then Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king desires no marriage present except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged on the king's enemies. Now Saul planned to make David fall by the hands of the Philistines. So like, one of these guys will kill David. When the servants told David these words, David was well pleased to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David rose and went, along with his men, and killed 100 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. What a horrible present. They're like, do you carry them in a bag, in a basket? How do you transport those? And does somebody like sit there and count them and make sure there's 100? I was like, gross, bloody present. And if you're Michael, it's like, oh yeah, my husband just paid for me with 100 foreskins. So Saul gave him his daughter Michal as a wife. But when Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that Saul's daughter Michal loved him, Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy from that time forward. Verse 30, then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his fame became very great. Chapter 19. Saul spoke with his son Jonathan and with all his servants about killing David. But Saul's son Jonathan took great delight in David, which we heard in the previous chapter when he literally gave him his armor and robe and all his stuff. Jonathan told David, "My father Saul is trying to kill you, therefore be on guard tomorrow morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. I'll go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. If I learn anything, I will tell you." Jonathan spoke well of David to his father Saul, saying to him, "The king should not sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have been a good service to you. For he took his life in his hand when he attacked the Philistine," that would be Goliath, "and the Lord brought about a great victory for Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against an innocent person by killing David without cause?" Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death." So Jonathan called David and related all these things to him. Jonathan then brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before, because he used to be there playing the lyre and hanging out and being with Saul, and then he stopped doing that, but now he's brought back for a little bit. Verse 8. Again there was war, and David went out to fight the Philistines. He launched a heavy attack on them, so that they fled before him. Then an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand, while David was playing music. Saul sought to pin David to the wall with his spear, but he eluded Saul, so that he struck the spear into the wall. David fled and escaped that night. Verse 11. Saul sent messengers to David's house to keep watch over him, planning to kill him in the morning. David's wife Michal told him, "If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through the window. He fled away and escaped. Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed. She put a net of goat's hair on its head and covered it with clothes. When Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, "He's sick." Then Saul sent the messengers to see David for themselves. He said, "Bring him up to me in the bed, that I may kill him." When the messengers came in, the idol was in the bed with covering of goat's hair on its head. Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me like this and let my enemy go so that he has escaped?" Michal answered Saul, "He said to me, 'Let me go, why should I kill you?'" In other words, she says, well, if I didn't, he was going to kill me, which is obviously not the case. But, and what is Michal going to do? Verse 18, Now David fled and escaped. He came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. He and Samuel went and settled at Naioth. Saul was told, "David is at Naioth and Ramah." Then Saul sent messengers to take David. When they saw the company of the prophets in a frenzy, with Samuel standing in charge of them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also fell into a prophetic frenzy. When Saul was told, he sent other messengers, and they also fell into a frenzy. Saul sent messengers a third time, and they also fell into a frenzy. Then he himself went to Ramah. He came to the great well that is in Seku. He asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" And someone said, "They are at Naioth and Ramah." He went there toward Naioth and Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him. As he was going, he fell into a prophetic frenzy, until he came to Naioth at Ramah. He too stripped off his clothes, and he too fell into a frenzy before Samuel. He lay naked all that day and all that night. Therefore it is said, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" So somehow this is a proverb, an expression, a thing that the Israelites would say, "Is Saul among the prophets?" which would have all kinds of possible meanings for what they would mean by that. But you've said it, and now God has come, and things have changed. So I'm thinking if there's anything else I wanted to say about that. It's hard when God was with you and then God is not with you. Saul is clearly a very very human, very real person in one sense, and very troubled. He's very up and down, where he's following God and then he's not following God. And all the way through Saul's kingship, he is clearly very concerned about what people think, especially, he does a lot of what he does because of what the people around him are doing, and he's very, very sensitive to public opinion in both positive and negative. When they're doing well, then he's great, and when the public says, oh well, David's doing better, then he gets jealous and unhappy with that. So way more concerned with what the public thinks than with what God thinks, which it's pretty normal, isn't it? It's really a human thing that we all want people to think highly of us and to look at us and to think well of us. And we also all want to be individual and be able to stand up and say, well, I serve God and I want to do this thing. And it's this tension that we all live within, that we don't walk around naked. We wear clothes. We do want to be fit into our society and our culture appropriately. And at the same time, we should have strength of character enough to say, this is what God has called me to do, or this is the thing that I feel that I must do, to take care of other people in spite of how people might treat us, to do what God calls us to do, even if it's not a popular thing, to say what is right. In our climate today, sometimes people standing up and doing what's right sometimes can be a dangerous, or at least a lonely thing. And yet we are called to be a lot more concerned about with what God thinks of us than what other people think of us. And it can be a challenge. But in the end, David was a man after God's own heart, and God's Spirit came and involved him. Later on, he will make some mistakes too, because he too is human. But his desire more than anything is to please God and to live right before God, which of course is our goal as people who follow God, to be disciples of Christ, not disciples of public opinion. So just something for food for thought, something to think about. And now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord look at you with favor and give you peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Like, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you again next time. Have a great day.